for me, the main responsibility of this is inside of the leadership. So whoever is leading that team and or the company, depending how big it is, needs to foster this and need to build a culture inside of the team that's not going back. Because a lot of companies, they work in waves. They are sometimes very innovative, and then they are successful, and then they're not innovative anymore. And sometimes these waves are like 50 years or 20 years. But it's really important that you see, if you look backwards in companies which went down, it's often a leadership issue. It's not that it is an issue of the team is not creative anymore. It's really about how does a leader take it from fostering this on a day-to-day basis, and really on small details. It's not about doing a team coaching or a team exercise every week. It's really what can you do as a leader to do that differently. And the tricky thing, and that's what I believe all companies in the future need to change, is how do you change the leadership structure that you built in an adaptable company with all the forces that are, if we look into the changes from the outside world, if we take Corona and COVID, which hit all of us from a business perspective, the companies that have been able to adapt faster, which means they have had a culture internally that thinks about innovation, are more successful when there is something like Corona or COVID coming. And I think the change from the external world with new technologies coming is getting faster and faster and faster. That means we need to change the leadership in organizations so that they empower the teams to be more flexible in an ongoing way. And that's, I think, one of the challenges we will have in the next 5 to 10 years. All our organizations will have that. So the companies who are early on in adapting these new ways of thinking, bringing the culture into the organization where innovation is not a buzzword. For me, innovation is just a tool. Innovation is an opportunity for you to think differently. And if you do that well, it's happening on a day-to-day basis, like a habit you create.
So you think it's sustainable over time? Because there are many examples, as you said, of companies that start being really innovative, and then they have their life cycle and they just disappear, some of them. There are some famous or infamous examples for that. You think it's not necessarily like that? You can sustain it.
You can. I think it's key part from an ownership of the company to drive this forward and build that into the structure of the business. So like the executive board and the owners of that business need to drive that going forward. And that's why you need to build it into the culture, because even if the management is changing, which is happening in organizations, the culture will educate the new CEO. For example, if you get a new CEO, the culture will educate the new CEO that this is the way how we do things, like it is in all organizations. Even that we sometimes think a new CEO will get new wind. Yes, that's the case. But if the culture is very strong and innovative, then it's going to stay long term. The tricky thing, a lot of organizations are not investing into the culture, into people inside of their organization. And that's why it's going only, hey, there's a strategy, there's a budget for innovation, then it's getting towards innovation. And then it's happening maybe for 2 years if you're lucky. But then the wind is changing and the budgets are restrained, and then innovation is not happening anymore because there was no focus on the cultural part. And if we go back to IKEA has done this now over, I think, 70 years. And they're still innovating on a day-to-day basis. And that's because of the culture.
It can be some kind of life insurance for a company to be to have an innovation culture.